Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give people an opportunity to join us before we start. The numbers are still ticking up. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at today's Making the Most of Your Pupillage Application webinar, which we're delivering as part of this year's Pupillage Fair. My name is Carolyn, and I'm the Bar Council's Director of Services, Training and Events. I have worked with the bar for the past 13 years. And for my sins, my list of accomplishments includes, I think, being the only person in the world to have used a version of the Pupillage Gateway as an applicant, a recruitment manager, and now a Bar Council super user. So, beat that. I'm joined this afternoon by barristers Joel Semakula and Jamie Jenkins, and the Bar Council's Head of Services, Michelle Moxon. Joel is a barrister at Landmark Chambers, and he specialises in property, planning, and environmental law. He came to the bar after a previous career in Wall Street, and he says many unsuccessful pupillage applications, but it only takes one. You can find him on the platform formerly known as Twitter at JK Semakula. Or on LinkedIn, and he's often talking about social mobility comedy, but occasionally talks about law as well. Jamie is a barrister at St John's Buildings, and he specialises in employment, equality, and education law. He's been on Chambers' Pupillage Committee for about 6 years now, but he's been giving advice to pupillage applicants both online and offline for considerably longer. You can find him on Twitter or X at Jenkins SJB. And last but not least, Michelle Moxon is the Bar Council's Head of Services, and she's been with the organisation for the past 10 years. She has the misfortune of being line managed by me, and she's responsible for a team of 3. The services team in our organisation delivers a wide-ranging portfolio, which includes the immigration support scheme, the direct access portal, and most importantly, the Pupillage Gateway. So before we begin today's webinar properly, which will include a kind of demonstration of the platform from Michelle with commentary, hopefully helpful commentary from Jamie and Joel, I have some housekeeping to go through. And whilst I do that, Michelle is going to start sharing her screen and setting up a new profile on the Pupillage Gateway. And the web address to do that at is recruitment.pupillagegateway.com. So you may have noticed this event is being recorded. I'm waiting just to check. Yes, great, perfect. So this event's being recorded. It will be made available to view publicly after the Pupillage Fair. The only people that will be visible in the recording are the panel members. So if you're not one of us, then we can't see your face and you can react in whatever way you please. You may also have noticed that we've muted your microphones. So if you'd like to ask a question during the event, then you can do so using the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of the screen. We won't really be looking at the chat function. So if you can stick to the Q&A tab, that would be great. We've only got 45 minutes. We've got a lot to get through. We will try and answer all of your questions, but I apologise in advance if it's not possible to do so. So that being said, Michelle, I can see that you've not got very far, but do you want to take over?
Yes, I can do so. So I am now going to register with the Gateway.
This is where we start to panic it doesn't work properly. Failing at the first hurdle.
If not, I'll use the one I created earlier.
Oh, Michelle.
So once you've logged in, yay. What will happen is you'll come up and you'll go straight into your dashboard. It would have already asked you your profile questions when you were setting up your account. So to set up, it'll ask your title, your first name, your last name. It will ask you whether you're willing to locate, distance willing to travel, notice period. This kind of information you can put in, and it's just there for your profile and for your benefit. It will ask you for your mobile number and an email address. It will ask you for your address. It will ask you for your employment and work experience history, which we'll come back to at a later stage. And you can fill it out either at that stage or later on during the process. It will ask you for your education history as well, which will also ask you to fill out at a later process. So when you're actually looking for advertisements, you come to your profile and at the top of the page, you search for pupillages. So once you open up the page, you should see all vacancies that are available. At the bottom of the screen, it will have 1 to however many pages there are. And at this point, you can actually start searching for jobs using keywords. So the keywords would be the kind of things like crime, chancery. There isn't a search functionality that actually has that in the drop downs here. You'll see you've got country, location, distance, pupillage start date, pupillage type. What the chambers will do when they're setting up their AETO vacancy, in their actual jobs, they will tag keywords in the areas of practice that they're in. So words like debt recovery. So if I show you quickly here, if I click crime, it's taken out anyone that hasn't tagged crime as part of their vacancy. So with that, if I've created a search, what I can do is I can click this button here to get alerts on this search. What this will do is it will go into my saved searches, and each time someone creates a vacancy where they've tagged the word crime, you will get an email into your email that you specified when you opened your account telling you that a new vacancy has appeared. We do also have watch list. Now with the watch list, anything you put on a watch list will only stay on there for 1 month at present. We are aware of this being a problem, and we have actually asked the developers of the ATS, and have been doing so for the last year, to be able to adapt this so that whoever you put in your watch list will stay there. But at present, they still haven't done that development work. So I would suggest not adding anyone to your watch list until December time. So moving on from that, once you've done that, you can then have a look at the vacancies by clicking this button here where you can view them. So if I come back out of that search, and if I go into view a vacancy here, it will tell me what the vacancy information here. So it will tell you about the AETO, it will tell you the structure of the pupillage, financial and other support available, equality and diversity and inclusion information, and more importantly, how to apply. So the barristers will have a set number of questions between 1 and 7. They don't have to ask them all. But here they should tell you the questions that they've asked or will be asking when you make the application process when it goes live on the 3rd of January. They should also specify the minimum, maximum, either character count or word count, which has changed this year. Last year, we only had the option of character count. This year, we've been able to develop the platform to include word count if Chambers wishes to use that as part of their bespoke questions.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, obviously not every authorised education and training organisation uses the Pupillage Gateway to manage their recruitment process. So they all have to advertise on the platform, but they don't have to use it to process their applications. So where you see the text that Michelle's just shown you, that indicates that they are a Pupillage Gateway subscriber, and they'll be using the Pupillage Gateway to manage their recruitment process. If they're not, then they will provide alternative text to indicate what their recruitment process is. So often redirecting you to their website or specifying that they expect a CV and covering letter. This information is available, will be available rather, from the end of November. So you actually have a month or so in advance of the application window going live to start thinking about your answers. And I wonder, Joel, Jamie, do you have any tips for how to deal with Chambers bespoke questions? They're very wide ranging, so I know it's not the easiest thing to deal with.
Did we decide which of us was going to deal with this one? I'll deal with it. It's fine. I think the main point about the bespoke questions, and there are certain types that you can. There are some common themes that you get with them, but the main tip that applies to all of them is the same tip that almost applies to how you're looking at your application as a whole, which is the big shift from doing things like exams, as you will have been doing for a long time by the time you reach this point, and doing a pupillage application, is that you need to get out of the mindset of there being absolute right answers or specific tick boxes you need to hit or phrases you need to use that will magically get you an interview. It's much more freeform than that. The application process as a whole is about showing us who you are as a candidate, and you won't be the right fit for every Chambers you apply to. The hope is that you're a good enough fit for a high enough number to get the interviews you need to get pupillage. But it's about showing us who you are as a candidate, what skills you have developed and what insight you have. And that mindset needs to be carried over into those questions. So if the question is something along the lines of, what law would you change and why? There is not a right answer to that question. It is about drawing on something that you know about to show the insight you have and to show how you can persuade Chambers of something in the character limit that you have. So it's about really, as best you can, taking that mindset into the specific questions you're asked. And if it's something like, some questions that I don't think are quite as good, but things like, how would your friends describe you? Which is an awful question. And or something like, what are your interests? Something a bit more personal. Just answer it in a bit more of a personal way. You've shown everything else about you on the form. So again, don't go thinking there's a right answer. Within reason, you can be candid about things like that. But yeah, you use your own approach, your own insight, and show Chambers who you are as a candidate with these questions.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Joel, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great. Let's move on from that. That's great.
And we've had a question to ask whether the advertisement form differentiates between applications coming from the employed bar and those coming from Chambers. Not in a specific way, but obviously in terms of what the information that AETOs provide. I normally would expect them to specify if it's an employed bar pupillage. There aren't that many employed bar organisations that advertise for pupillages annually. The ones that are most significant are the CPS, the GLT, Government Legal Department. I nearly said GDL. Too many confusing acronyms at the bar, and also there's a few other kind of smaller government departments that offer pupillages each year. We're always happy if you email the team at Pupillage Gateway at barcouncil.org.uk to kind of indicate specifically which ones are employed bar, if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so Michelle, do you want to
Yep.
move on?
Okay, so now we're going to look at your profile. We're going to look at the employment and work experience history and education history. At this point, whenever you're making changes to these sections, regardless of whether you submitted your application, these changes will be reflected in that application. So it does copy through to each of your applications that you make. So in relation to employment and work experience history, when you're adding more, you just need to fill out the mandatory fields with the employment status, organisation names, dates and end dates, and a description of your roles and responsibilities. And then you just click add. If you want to remove any, again, if you do delete them at any stage, it will reflect throughout the applications that you've made and even the ones that you've submitted. In relation to education history, it's exactly the same process.
and I think it's probably it's probably important just on the work experience and employment section to talk about how you can kind of use the responsibilities box to your advantage. So Joel, you're not on mute, so do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sorry, that was exactly where I was going. So you see there it says description of role and responsibilities. And as you'll have heard multiple times throughout this process, the whole idea is to be an advocate for yourself as to why it is Chambers should take you on as a pupil and ultimately why you'll make a great barrister. So what you really want to be thinking about is all of your roles, both legal and non-legal, and you want to be drawing out key skills and key examples of things that you did that demonstrate why you would be a good barrister or a good fit for your area of law and Chambers. I mean, an example that comes to mind for me is a good friend of mine from bar school who worked as a customer care assistant at McDonald's, and that featured, I think, in her pupillage application. I think she said to us that nearly every interview that she went to, this was a topic that came up, and it ended up being something she could talk very comfortably about and very well about, and people were interested in that. And the ability to work with different types of people, the ability to work under pressure, the level of stress sometimes she dealt with. I mean, exactly the types of things that you might encounter as a barrister. So I mean, that's what we really say about this particular section.
Great, thanks, Joel. Yeah, and I think if you missed it yesterday, we one of the webinars that we were running was about career changes at the bar, which again has been recorded, and that recording will be released after the Pupillage Fair. But they talked a lot about that idea of transferable skills and how they can be used to your advantage in your applications, interviews, and pupillage. So take a look at that if that's something that you want more information on. Someone's asked, I think, a very relevant question, given that you can't bespoke this particular section of the form, which is if you've had a lot of kind of different roles as part of your employment history, you've done a lot of mini pupillages, etc. How much of those should you be putting in? What's the best way to kind of edit yourself, bearing in mind that you can't tailor this section of the form? Jamie, do you maybe want to pick that one up?
In short, use your judgment with it. Certainly at the time when applicants could tailor their applications, and even now, you do find when you're sifting applications that there are people who just put far too many examples down. Part of the element of judgment when drafting your application is restricting it to relevant experiences. You need to do your best to, yes, let us know what you've done and who you are as a candidate, but also don't put things in that we don't need to know about, or that you're just repeating the same points over and over again. So you may have done 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 mini pupillages, but restrict them to the most relevant ones. And it may be if you're applying, for example, to different sets with different practice areas, that you maybe put down one mini pupillage in one practice area, one in another. You don't need to tailor an application to an absolutely specific area of law to get a pupillage in that area of law, to get an interview in that area of law. So it's about finding that balance between highlighting your relevant experience, highlighting some specific experience in particular areas as and when you need to, but also only putting in what you need to in terms of not going with repetition and things we don't need to know. It's actually exactly the same skill that you will do when you're a barrister in submissions, written submissions, skeleton arguments. Restricting what you say to what you need to say is a skill we're looking out for. So it's something that you should be actively trying to address in your applications.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and someone's also asked, can you put voluntary roles in? Of course, it's designed to cover both employment and work experience opportunities. So just because you weren't paid for the work doesn't make it completely relevant to your application. Right, shall we pick up from here and move on to the next section, Michelle?
Okay, so with education history, The main thing that we would say to you is when you're filling out this is to make sure that you follow the guidelines that we have in the user guide in relation to the information you put on here. A lot of people put their skills down last year, but not any of the grades they obtained or that were pending. In relation to that, it's just making sure that you put all that information in here so that when chambers get it, that they can actually see the grades that you obtained. So Joel or Jamie, I don't know if you want to speak about how chambers or AETOs mark academic achievements.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my general view of the sifting process. So a lot of, well, many chambers, as far as I understand, will have a process whereby they allocate points on the basis of the type of qualification, and so it may be for different A-level grades. A certain number of points are awarded. A certain number of points are awarded for the bachelor's degree, and then for if you've done any kind of postgraduate degrees, there are points awarded based on what you've achieved in those within those establishments. The key point here is if you don't put the grades down, I think sometimes that also means if you don't put the predicted grades down, then you're just doing yourself out of any points that could have been allocated on that section of the sifting process. So it's not often helpful to leave that off, and often if you do leave it blank, then chambers will be wondering, well, why have you done that? And remember, if the grades aren't quite what you think they should be for chambers, then do explain that at the point in the application that you get the opportunity to do that. But it's important that you tell the full story here, because the intellectual part and the academic ability is a part of the process and what chambers are looking for, and this is the way it's often demonstrated.
Great, thank you. Jamie, is there anything you feel you can add to that?
Just say that it's right that every set will deal with it slightly differently. Every set will have a different scoring matrix, and unfortunately, as applicants, you don't get to see in advance. In most cases, a small number of sets are publishing it now, but it's still a very small minority. The general point to take away from academics is that good academics do not get you an interview, but bad academics can make it very difficult to get an interview. So to give an example, if academics are scored out of 3, say, and the entire application is scored out of 16, if you get a 3 in academics, you still need to get a lot of points in different areas to get an interview. But if you only get 1 in academics and you need 13 or 14 to get an interview elsewhere, that's going to make it very difficult to get an interview, because the rest of your application is going to need to be pretty much flawless. So that's about the balance. When people ask about, well, what if I got a first? What if I only got a 2-1? What if I only got a 2-1 from this university? What if I didn't do an LLM? The reality is that for something like being scored out of 3, most candidates will probably score a 2, and then there'll be some that score 1 and some that score 3. But you should see your academics in the context of your application as a whole. You need to hit certain minimum levels. Having something like a 2-2 without good extenuating circumstances is going to cause you problems in terms of how it fits into the overall framework. But they help you. They are not the main reason you will get an interview, but they can stop you getting an interview if you don't get enough marks in it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're getting a lot of questions about how much information to give in relation to your grades, whether you should include GCSEs, A levels, etc. Every chambers takes a different approach in terms of, you know, how they mark grades and which grades they're interested in. There are still a small number of AETOs that do look at A levels and even GCSEs. So I would recommend personally that you include everything, and you know, make sure that you're indicating what your what the kind of breakdown of your marks have been during university. If you're an international student, then try and just contextualize your results a little bit so that the barristers that are assessing your application can understand, you know, how your mark compares to our academic system, or, you know, if it was the top mark that you could have achieved, for example. And I think it's important really to do that, to give yourself the best possible chance of success. Of course, if you're concerned about the grades that you've received, then there are other areas of the application form where you can talk to exceptional circumstances, and we will come on to that in a moment. So Michelle, do you want to pick up and move on?
Yep. So I am going to take you through now how to apply for the pupillage. So the pupillages this year will go live on the 3rd of January, and you have until the 7th of February to apply. So what you will see before that time is you won't have this option. Once it goes live, you can apply for this pupillage. What it will then do is it will take you through your answers that you've already put, so your title, your pronouns, etc., your name, your address. It will then go through your employment and work experience history. So if at this point you think, oh, I need to add something else here that I've forgotten, if you add it here, again, it will reflect throughout your applications that you've already done, because you're just adding to your profile builder at this stage. So even if you do add it here, it will carry across. So you carry on with your employment and work experience history. If that's already pre-populated, that's fine. You just continue on to the next section. This will then take you through to the Bar Council standardized questionnaires, which you would get asked. So first of all, you have further education history, scholarships, award and prizes. So it will ask you, have you applied or planned to apply for a waiver? Scholarships, awards and prizes.
I think those are fairly straightforward, Michelle.
Yep. Oh, I have to answer them. Forgot. So what happens when things are mandatory. So if you've actually already completed an application before, all these boxes will actually be pre-populated for you from what you answered before, because they're standardized questions, they will assume that the answers will always be the same. So you don't have to type them out again. So then we've got languages, professional qualifications, positions of responsibility, interest and recreational activities. So I don't know, Joel or Jamie, whether you'd like to talk about how candidates can make the most of the section professional qualifications, hobbies and interests, and positions of responsibility.
I can take hobbies and interests. I'm not sure I have that much more to add on professional qualifications. But in terms of interests, again, remember, those reading applications are looking at a lot of pupillage applications, and what they're trying to determine is one, whether this person has the ability and has expressed, really the right level of interest to join them in chambers and be a fellow member of their chambers. But also, second, they're looking to see if this is someone they actually want to meet and would be a person they'd want to have, they'd want as a colleague for the next 15, 20, 30 years, however long that is. So if you have interests or things about you beyond your life as a lawyer that you want to share and you may want to speak with other people about, then do add them here. People at the bar do respect and are interested in your life outside of the law. But just remember, anything on this application is fair game. So if you put down, you're very interested in a particular topic, be ready to discuss that at interview. And that should be a part of your preparation. Have some kind of story or kind of anecdote that you can share, because you don't want to fall flat being asked about something you've put in this section right at the end of the interview, just as kind of as a closing matter, and then just see everything kind of escape through your arms there. Just speaking for myself, as Carolyn mentioned earlier on, I do some comedy when I'm not living my life as a lawyer, and that's something I was very happy to share on my form, and people were interested in my interviews, and I felt very comfortable speaking about. So, and there's a range of interests that my colleagues share in chambers too. So please do put those things down.
Great, thanks, Del. Anything to add to that, Jamie?
Just to emphasise, the be prepared to talk about it point. Please, please, please only put things and interests and hobbies that you're interested in. Don't put things on there that you think make you look smarter or a better candidate, but you don't actually have any interest in. And this may sound so obvious, but when Queen's Gambit came out on Netflix, there were 2 interviews I had where the interviewees had put on their form that they're interested in chess, and there was a person on the panel who was a big chess player, and as a last question for each of them, not part of anything we scored them on, but as the last question for each of those candidates, he asked them how they respond to the most common move in chess, which is white moving the king's pawn forward 2, and neither of them could answer it. It's just, they clearly didn't really have an interest in chess. So it's a really small point, and that isn't a part of any reason why those candidates did or didn't get interviewed. It goes to the point of, don't put down on these forms anywhere things you think we want to see. Show us who you are, particularly with interests and hobbies. Just say what you're interested in. It's fine.
Great, thank you. And we've got a few questions actually just about the previous section. There's no need to go back to it, Michelle, in terms of scholarships and awards. So people are saying that, you know, they've received kind of scholarships or awards that have not necessarily been huge amounts of money from their academic institutions or otherwise, or they've been kind of discounted fees on their tuition. Do you think they should include those in, you know, is it worth doing that?
I'll see if Jamie shares my view. Like, I think if you've got things that you're proud of that you want to share, put them down on your form. You've got to exercise some level of judgment. If it's an award that only you or someone from the university would understand what it is, then put an explanation as to what it actually means or what the criteria were for getting it. Chambers will naturally be interested in awards often related to something to do with the bar or something to do with your life as a lawyer. That's probably what they're most interested in. But there are many ways to show excellence. So if you're like the #1, I don't know, flutist in the UK, or you represented, or I don't know, you reached a high level in a sport, or you've done other things, you know, do you share those things? And Chambers will approach it differently as to how they award any points or how they address those things. But again, this is a matter for your judgment.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Well, okay, Michelle, do you want to move on?
So the next section you'll get to is extenuating circumstances and other disclosures, where we ask you to put down information in relation to them, or none, if that's what the case may be. So in relation to this section, Joel, Jamie, any advice as what they should be putting into these sections for Chambers?
Yeah, I can help with this. So there are 2 aspects to when I say successfully or properly putting across extenuating circumstances, because by their nature, they are circumstances whereby you're asking Chambers to disregard a certain weakness in your application. So there are 2 parts to this. The first is that your extenuating circumstances are actually genuinely extenuating circumstances. I am not going to judge the issues that any particular person has in their private life, but just simply as a matter of observation, a decent number of the extenuating circumstances I see on these forms are not really extenuating circumstances. They're difficulties that people have gone through, but they are not necessarily reasons why you didn't get certain grades that you were expecting. So first, the extenuating circumstances do need to be decent ones. And they also need to be really extenuating circumstances why you didn't get a baseline score. So either you got a 2-2 instead of a 2-1 or something like that. If it's a reason why you came 3rd instead of 1st in your class at Oxford, that's not an extenuating circumstance. So leave it off. The second one is you then, on other parts of your form, need to be able to show what your true level of ability is. So even if you very unfortunately have extenuating circumstances that have extended across 5, 6, 7 years, and all of your academic results, for example, are below the level that you think your genuine level is, that is not necessarily going to be helpful. That's a pretty extreme example, but you need to also have, and this is not something you put in the box, but it's something you need to have been able to demonstrate at some other point what your genuine level is. So let's say you have extenuating circumstances for your A levels, you got DDE, but then you go on to get a first in your undergraduate and are very competent on the bar course. Well, it's a perfect situation where you can explain the circumstances as to why your A levels were relatively poor, but we can clearly see as people reading your application that your true level is reflected in what you got at undergraduate and on the bar course. So you need to be able to show what your true level is, as well as there being a good reason why some previous results were not as you wanted them to be.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Joel, do you have anything to add to that, or shall we move on to the next section? Oh, you're on mute. Someone was going to do it at some point.
Sorry. The only thing I want to say is I hope that I don't want people to be discouraged from putting down their extenuating circumstances. If you have something generally that's happened, then do share. But I think you really should consider Jamie's advice as to how you present that. You look, if something's affected your ability to put forward the best application you can, and then do say that. But you've got to demonstrate the aspects I think that Jamie's described.
Great, thank you. Someone has asked in relation to the section, do you need to say what illness you had, or are you allowed to simply say that you were ill? So I guess how much detail do you think you should be giving?
It depends what else you have to say, really. And again, it's a matter for judgment. If most people on the forms will give at least some explanation as to what the illness was, because I'm sure you can imagine, again, I'm not doubting that anybody was not genuinely ill, but I'm sure you can imagine that somebody just writing down, I was ill during my A levels, it's very easy for somebody who's reading an application form who's on the fence about the validity of that to not be convinced by it. And I'm not saying that you need to produce exhaustive evidence of it, but at the same time, nobody's going to be taking what you put in these application forms, because they're anonymous when they come through to chambers, and shouting it from the rooftops. So again, it's about finding a balance with that. I generally wouldn't simply say you are ill. I would give at least some explanation of that, even if it's just stating a condition or something in more vague terms. But you don't need to regurgitate your medical records in that form. It's about finding the balance, so that when we can see that there's a gap where your A levels are poor, but there's a clear demonstration of improvement after that, it just needs to give us enough that we can be satisfied what that explanation is. And as I say, just putting you're ill, I don't think generally would be enough.
Great, thank you. And we've had a lot of questions about people's specific extenuating circumstances. I mean, unfortunately, we're just not going to have the time to address all of those. I think I recognize that not everyone will have contacts within the profession, but if you do have a barrister that is able to act as your mentor, which you can get through the Inns of Court, through the Bar Council, through the specialist bar associations, and a lot of different organizations in the profession, or if you are working with a supervisor during a mini pupillage or something similar, then have this conversation with them. But most of the barristers, in fact all of the barristers that I know, are more than happy to give people guidance on these sorts of issues. And so if it's something that you're not sure kind of how to approach, then have those conversations with the people that you meet, even on Saturday, if you're coming to the fair and you want some more kind of specific guidance. That's what these sorts of events are for.
I'd also consider speaking to the education department if you're in. They're very helpful for this kind of stuff, and very accessible if you can't get to a barrister. So
yeah. We've also had some questions about the disclosures section. I'm not going to talk to that specifically this evening. At the moment, the Bar Council's Ethics Committee is actually putting together some more specific advice for that section, which will be on the platform by the time we start accepting applications next year. If there is something you feel you may need to put in the disclosures box and you're not sure whether or not you should, then you are always welcome to call the Bar Council's Ethical Inquiry Service or email our pupillage, well, it's a helpline, but it's an email service, our pupillage helpline. And one of my colleagues who is trained to deal with those kind of questions will help to give you some guidance on that. And we'll post the links for those helplines in the chat as well. Okay. So Michelle is, I can see she's now got the kind of references section up. Just a word of warning, this section may not actually appear in the application form this year. TribePad have just completed some development work that will enable us to deal with references in a slightly different way. So subject to the testing for that going well, then you may be asked to put this information in your profile as opposed to in your application. And obviously, if we do make any changes to that, then we'll make sure that we communicate them by email and through the Pupillage Gateway website and social media and other forms of marketing at our disposal. And Michelle, do you want to pick up?
Yep, so that's fine. So the only thing with it's gone back twice. With references is that we usually ask you to actually provide a academic and a professional reference. That's what we recommend. However, you may not have both, so it is okay to either choose two academic or two professional, but it is recommended that you actually do one of each in relation to that. So as Carolyn said, this is not likely to be here when you complete the application forms, but it will be what you will be asked during the onboarding process to give these references. So if we continue on to the next question, will be the 7 questions bespoke to what chambers have asked you. And here you will see the required questions. Like all the other questions, you'll have guidelines of how the AETOs may want you to answer that question or what they're looking for specifically. They don't have to put that in. There are generally sometimes 2 Bar Council questions. They're not mandatory for AETOs to use, but you may find them throughout the applications in various different places or worded differently. They will also validate these questions to whether they're actually required or whether they have a word or character count, which will tell you here. You can copy and paste these in from Word as plain text, and you can actually format them yourself when you're actually putting them in. It will tell you once you're typing, if you get down to the last number of words, it won't let you type any further. If you do copy and paste too many words, it will then just remove them. Please note that if you copy and paste and you've had it in a format, if you've gone over the word count, it will remove all the spaces and it will remove the formatting. So as you're aware, you can see what the word count is and you can prepare in advance. In Word, it will tell you how many words. So you shouldn't really be copying across over that amount of words, but if you do, it will just remove the formatting and the amount of words that you've gone over.
Thanks, Michelle. And we're starting to run out of time, Michelle, so I'm going to have to speed you up a little bit on the remainder of the process.
It's the required questions.
There's still a lot of questions coming into the Q&A, and whilst Michelle answers all these mandatory questions, I've asked the training and events team if they'll pull the questions so that we can kind of go through them after today and pull together some sort of blog post or similar to help deal with more of those that have come through. Michelle and I will also be at the Pupillage Fair on Saturday. Michelle will be at the Bar Council exhibition stand. I will be on the registration desk. So if there's things that you want to ask about the platform, then you can come to one of us, and we'll do our best to help you with that. Or even about recruitment processes more specifically. I've worked in 2 chambers, so you know, I should be able to help with that. But so should the other hundreds of volunteers we have there on the day. So again, sorry if we've not managed to get to your question. As you can see, Michelle's now completing the equal opportunities monitoring form. I think very important to note with this form that it's not something chambers can see when they are going through their shortlisting processes. All the data that you enter into this is kept in a completely different part of the Pupillage Gateway platform. So it's very much treated on a confidential basis, and is also something that only 1 or 2 select people within each AETO will have access to, usually the Chamber's administrator or the diversity data officer. So we so, you know, don't be shy to kind of include specific details about your background. And it really helps us actually if you don't opt to use the preferred not to say, because we use all the data that you enter into that form to pull together our annual Pupillage Gateway report. So we're currently building the one from the last process, but again, I will put in the chat the link to the 2022 version. I think whilst Michelle's finishing off the form, I mean, Jamie, Joel, are there any kind of final top tips you feel we should share before we bring the event to a close?
I was just going to ask Carolyn, how long are we still live? Because I know that Joel's been trying to type answers to some of these questions. And
so have I.
You want me to just, because I've read about 3/4 of them. Do you want me to see like how many I can burn through in the next 5 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, the training and events team will absolutely kill me for overrunning, but we can do maybe 5 more minutes and see how many we can get through between us.
This is going to go. I have been looking through while you've been talking. This is going to go really, really quick, but I reckon I can get through quite a lot of it. So, I mean, Joel, is there anything else you want to say before I just start just flying through them?
Why don't you go? And I've got 30 seconds that I'll follow up with afterwards. But I've been trying to hit some of the quick ones, but let's go for it.
Yeah, I've seen you typing. All right, okay, right. I'm just going to go through and answer the ones that I can answer in like a sentence or less. So, in roles and responsibilities, should I identify those skills that would be helpful for being a barrister, or should I go further and explicitly state why that's so? Well, again, it's a balance. So sometimes you will explain why that's so, but we know what it takes to be a barrister because we are barristers. So you showing us that insight should generally be enough in terms of what the relevant skills are. If you haven't done a mini pupillage, but you have with a barrister, would you say it's possible to sell your interest in that area? Yes, there's lots of different ways to show that interest. Should we include grades for each module? No, there are some non-gateway sets that will ask you to do it, but not through the gateway. Do I recommend putting mooting and debating in the applications? Yes, do that. It's relevant. Where would you put grades from a study placement abroad if you didn't receive an official qualification? You can put it in the work experience section. It may be something that can go in academics, but I imagine it's probably work experience section if it's something you want to separate out. People who've done academics in other countries and don't have equivalents, so say for example international baccalaureate or something similar, still put those down, and maybe if it's really not obvious what they are, provide some sort of explanation as to what it is. But normally chambers will then focus on the things that they know about just naturally in terms of undergraduate degree and so on and so forth. There's a few questions about how different grades compare to each other. So if you have 2 undergraduate degrees, 1 non-law 2-2, 1 LLB, top first, you put both down, yes. Otherwise, there's a massive gap in your application form, and we're going to ask why. To what extent is a bar course passed with merit versus passed versus merit with distinction, a distinguishing factor for pupillage applicants? Again, it's just one thing that goes into your academics. Getting a competence on the bar course is normally not something that's great. It's normally not as bad as a 2-2, but it's something that you might be marked down for. Otherwise, a simple sort of merit versus distinction is not normally massively impactful. 2-2 in your undergraduate degree, but do well in the GDL, does that help with the academic part of the application? In and of itself, it doesn't really mitigate the 2-2. The 2-2 isn't a great thing to have, really, unfortunately. You need to do that in other areas as well. Do I think a 2-1 in the GDL and a very competent outweigh a 2-2 in an initial degree from a medical subject from over 10 years ago? Yet to a large degree, yes, actually. If your first degree is old, you have a lot more experience to draw upon to compensate for that, and it'll be less impactful when it's being assessed. Depends on the individual chambers, but if you've got a career in between, you can certainly make quite a lot of that. Extenuating circumstances, we've answered. What if your grades have not been good up until university? Academic brilliance develop later in life? Be upfront about it. Don't try and suggest it's something other than it is. There's also, it's somewhere further down, saying it's the only extenuating circumstances illness. No, the examples that are given there: financial hardship, caring responsibilities, moving different countries. I've seen various things like fleeing or being victims of domestic violence. All those are potentially extenuating circumstances. So anything like that can be put down. Again, something about mature student GCSEs along wide, would they be afforded the same weight? No, I've just explained that. Something else is about extenuating circumstances. Is there a limit on the amount of education history if you've got multiple degrees? I've never seen somebody put down too many academic qualifications on a form. I mean, if you're coming to the bar in your 60s and you've spent the last 40 years doing degrees, then maybe. But generally speaking, I think put them all down. And something else, again, extenuating circumstances, explain that. Form appearing biased towards younger generation. Well, I mean, the majority of the pupillage applicants are the younger generation, but again, as I said, you can make more of the time spent in between, or even in your case, if it's postgraduate qualifications that you have. Again, chambers will look at that, and whilst there are some chambers that will be put off by it, a lot of them will see that there's clearly a recent strong academic ability shown. So you should be able to get round that. When do you start your pupillage? Depends on the pupillage you apply for. Chambers will set that. Let's see.
I feel like you're running out of steam. Joel,
I'm not running out of steam. In real time.
I'm not probably going to do any more questions, but I've just been looking up something for everyone based off the types of questions we've been getting. A couple of resources that I'll point you to. Many of you will be aware, or maybe the 5 Essex Court releases a report every year on their own pupillage process. You just Google 5 Essex Court pupillage report. They released it in September 2023. In that report, they explain what the best candidates did and what the weaker candidates did. And that goes through things like what kind of grades people had, how people answered the "why do I want to be a barrister" question, how do people express their experience, what do people's forms look like. Now, that's slightly more appropriate for those who did civil applications, but that's a resource that I think can be very useful for a lot of people. I mean, I think the only other 2 points I'd make on these applications is you're all here today, but if you start, but you've got the opportunity to start early. So while the gateway itself may not be live yet, you know a lot of what's coming. So there's no reason why that can't be prepared. And then I think something we've always said throughout is you're applying to be an advocate. Use this as an opportunity to be, to show just what kind of advocate you will be. Remember, the person reading this application is going to have a stack of pupillage applications. They're going to be doing this probably on a Saturday or on an evening. And you know, they're not, it's something they do outside of their paid practice. So make it easy for them to give you points. Make it easy for them to find the information they need so that you can be successful and they can move you through to the next round. I think I'll leave it there, and good luck.
Can I answer two very quickly? I've seen the warning in the box.
Go on, Jamie.
two good questions. One was about whether you answer in bullet points or prose, and the answer is that's up to you. I've seen really good applications make use of both. So it depends how you want to put that information across. And the last one is, should you include humour? And the answer is I have seen written applications that include humour well, and those are vastly outnumbered by the ones that use it badly. So make sure that it is, one, appropriate, and two, actually funny. But I would say really very, very sparingly. It's the sort of thing you might be able to get more. You might be able to find better opportunities to use in interview. Again, sparingly, but at least we can see you in interview. It's really hard to do on an application form. So I'm not doing an absolute bar, but there's a big warning flag on it.
Right, well, yeah, we've been told to wrap up, and as you can see, we've put in the chat a few links to some of the things that have been mentioned this evening. As I said, if you've got any more questions about the Pupillage Gateway specifically, Michelle and I will be at the Pupillage Fair on Saturday if you're coming to that. If not, we've got the helplines and everything else in the chat. On the Pupillage Gateway itself, we have a user guide for applicants that covers not just what we were talking about this evening, but other things that you can do through the system, such as checking communications from chambers and booking interviews. We are currently in the process of updating that, so be aware there will be a new version of it once the advertisements go live towards the end of November. There's also a sample application form on there, so you can see all of the questions that we've gone through this evening relating to scholarships, extenuating circumstances, etc. And other than that, I think I just need to say thank you to Jamie, Joel, and Michelle for their time. I really hope that you all found this session to be useful and informative. And if you're coming on Saturday, I really look forward to seeing you there. So thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.